I'm Lauren Green, and you're in the strategy room. President Obama is doubling down on America's military campaign against ISIS, while acknowledging the terror group's ideology has spread far beyond Iraq and Syria. He urged the world on Monday to unite against this threat, saying that if the U.S. tries to address it unilaterally, quote, we'll be playing whack-a-mole. Here with reaction, our political strategists David Mercer and Brad Blakeman. Welcome to you both.
Good to be with you.
Brad, let me start with you. So your reaction to Obama's whack-a-mole comments about ISIS?
Where have you been, Mr. President? Just a year ago, you said that they were insignificant. They weren't a threat. They were a junior varsity. They're the varsity team, Mr. President. You were late to the game. You should have anticipated the strength that they would build in this region. The entire Middle East is in meltdown under your watch. And this is an outrageous attempt by the president to come late to a game that he should have controlled from the very beginning.
David, your comments, is it a little too late?
No, it isn't. And as the president remarked, it's a long-term game and strategy that has to be deployed towards ISIS. Putting it in perspective and a little history, that we have a vacuum left by our first going into Iraq under the auspices of WMD, which we of course found none. We found Osama bin Laden in Pakistan rather than Iraq. And we have a vacuum. The Maliki government was unstable. We've seen that replaced. And in the midst of transition to another government, you now have other conflicts emerging under the auspices of ISIS that are filling in that vacuum until there is the stability to eradicate them and return to a transition in Iraq, as well as dealing with Syria.
Yeah, but a month ago, Obama approved sending about 450 additional U.S. troops to Iraq, just part of, the effort to help train forces, and some other efforts have been made. He talks about how there's been a string of victories over ISIS in countries like Kirkuk and Tikrit. But is the U.S. doing enough in fighting the terror group? Brad?
No, we're not, and we won't under this president. This president has decided that he is going to limit his exposure on ISIS and every other responsibility he has by kicking the can down the road to the next president. This president is one who's going to contain his liability. We've seen it in everything, on health care, on immigration, and on national security and foreign policy. So it's going to be somebody else's problem. The president is watching the sand go through the hourglass, and he only hopes that there's no exposure for him until he hands off power to the next person.
David, Obama says, ISIS is nimble and digs in among local civilian populations. It will take time to root them out. Does this mean ground forces are necessary? I mean, by those statements, it almost seems like that's what he's saying.
Well, Lauren, I think your question goes to Brad's statement about limiting the president's exposure. The president's not trying to limit his exposure. He's trying to limit the exposure that we put our troops in harm's way, chasing something that we have not targeted or isolated yet in order to confine and to go after. We've been doing it by drone strikes. We have been hitting leaders. There have been recent setbacks by ISIS in both Syria and in Iraq. But at the same time, we're going to make sure, or the president's going to make sure, that when he puts troops on the ground, it is going at the right thing at the right time, and to reduce or to minimize the amount of exposure to those troops that he would be putting into harm's way. That's what he is doing, and doing it in a thoughtful way, as well as letting us know that it's going to be a long-term strategy to dealing with it, given the vacuum that was left in Iraq subsequent to our going in under the Bush administration.
And you're talking about increasing America's role in fighting ISIS, but the question is, does Obama have the political capital to do so, and also bring in allies to increase their role as well? David?
Well, I think he does, and you do have the allies that are sitting in the P1 or P5+1 on the Iran nuclear agreement. You have a lot of cooperation and a lot of coalition potential building, but at the same time, it's how do you approach this new phenomenon of ISIS that isn't coming from a government, that isn't coming, it just formed a year and a half ago. And so it's a matter of, again, seizing the right opportunity to eliminate ISIS in a way that would be a long-term benefit to the region and to allies in the whole.
And Brad, does Obama have the political capital to get the job done against ISIS?
No, he does not. And worse is he doesn't have the will. He doesn't have the strategy. By the president's own admission, a month ago, he said we don't have a strategy for ISIS. How is that even possible? General Jack Keane was on Fox earlier today and said it's unfathomable that the president didn't see this coming. Everybody else did. Senator McCain took to the floor of the Senate and said, Mr. President, you're inept. You're incapable of fighting this enemy. And guess what? You don't have the will, and no, you don't have the capital to do it because our friends don't believe in us and our enemies don't fear us.
All right,
well, I'll say, if I might just say this, Lauren.
Okay.
The same thing that Brad's saying now is what was said of Obama when it came to Osama bin Laden. And in fact, he demonstrated that he had the will and he also had the capacity to do it, which was not the same as his predecessor.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. David and Brad, thanks so much.
Sure.
You want to check out foxnews.com for more on the fight against ISIS. I'm Lauren Green, and thanks for watching.